YouTube. We have today with us Professor Arun.
Professor Arun Gupta was a senior professor and HOD of Film and Television at the National Institute of Design for more than 2 decades. He is currently the Dean of Anant National University's Faculty of Moving Images. He is a specialist in film language, film appreciation, film history, and film direction and screenwriting.
The talk is about the book today. His book is called Purab Aur Paschim, Colonials, Neighbours and Others, which is the first of many planned series on Bollywood Villainy. The book examines Bollywood villains from 4 films and looks at their cultural and societal causes for why the villains are the way they are. Welcome, Arun Gupta.
Thank you
so much for having us.
Thank you.
We would like to start with which is the first villain you happen to remember, and why do you think you remember that?
The first villain, of course, was Pran, because I was growing up in a suburb of Kolkata. Kolkata, as you know, is a Bengali-speaking town, but I was growing up there, and there were a lot of Hindi films which were screened, and the original villain of those films was really Pran. Pran Sikand is his full name. And that generation of Hindi film viewers would know Pran inside out. So the first villain was Pran, and Pran was not like the latter villains. He was a very suave villain. His villainy was in his looks and in the way he said things. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't rape women or sort of beat up people so much, but he said things in a certain way, and his behavior was villainous, and his intentions were dishonorable. So the villainy was of that kind,
So there was a certain charm to him.
So yeah, there was a certain charm to him, and actually watching villains in the times that I did, it was like a guilty pleasure, because you were officially not supposed to like villains and what they did, but the sole purpose of why villains were there in cinema was to enjoy their villainy. In all of us, there lies this desire to cross the threshold of niceness. No, all of us are actually want to be villainous in some way or the other, and sort of Pran fulfilled it for us. Pran as the man and Helen as the woman. And Helen, of course, was for men especially was sexy, and Helen was officially bad, but you could actually look at her bare legs and enjoy them, and later say chi 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 chi. So that the society sort of allowed you this escape. Villainy was really an escape into what you would have loved to do, but were not allowed to do. So today, of course, a lot of the things which were considered villainous and not allowed by the hero or the heroine is, the leading ladies and the leading men do it all the time. But in the 70s, when I was growing up, my early youth was 70s. Then, of course, villainy could be enjoyed if it was clearly stated that this is villainous, and it has to be condemned later. But once first you have enjoyed them, and then you condemn them later.
All right, sir. So you spoke about the purpose villains serve in our movies. So what do you think is the need for villains in our narratives?
I just explained to you the villains are necessary because that's what we want to do, man. In the times that the cabarets in Hindi cinema were very popular, among men, I presume, I was born a man, so I don't know what the women thought of the cabarets. But we enjoyed Helen and Bindu and Sonia Sahni dancing those cabarets and striptease and all that. And all this, these were middle class men who would otherwise not want their women to be uncovered at all, and here was this woman uncovering herself and actually doing it with a lot of fun. I am a great admirer of Helen today, and I'm a great admirer of all those women today because they were right there in your face and they didn't have a problem. But the men sort of enjoyed, so therefore the need for villainy was there because we would want to enjoy that kind of sexuality, an open display of sexuality. See, the thing is, our country is an amazing space where we reproduce at such a fast rate, but we couldn't talk sex in the public. We were doing it all the time, that's why we are so many of us. But we couldn't talk about it in the public. So this was one way of talk. For the longest of time, honestly, I thought that two flowers gaya and there's a child born after that, you know. I mean, honestly speaking, I mean, that was, I mean, I took a long time understanding the birds and the bees. So thanks to Hindi cinema, for the longest of time, I thought flowers coming together can produce kids. Yeah.
Right, so on a similar note, you said in an interview that our morality is contextual and personal. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So right now, if you are reading the newspaper, the Ukraine-Russia war is going on. Whose side are you on? Most probably you are on the side of what the Western powers are telling you, because the information you get is from AFP, AP, Reuters, Bloomberg, New York Times, all Western sources. You are not getting the other perspective at all. So therefore, the morality, it is completely, if you really read the newspaper, it's completely moral today to condemn Russia as the evil one and KGB. The Putin is a KGB man. And a lot of Bond films always had KGB as the villain. Right. But just few years back, the same Western world had nothing to say about the similar treatment being given to Iraq. And Iraqi men and women and children dying because the Americans were bombing them. Then the narrative was very different. So contextual, so who is a villain? Saddam Hussein was a villain and Putin is a villain. Because the contexts are created. Somebody's villain is somebody's hero. Yeah. In the book also, incidentally, yeah, let me pitch this book. This is the book I have written, and this is the first part, as they said, this is the first part of the book on Bollywood villains. Taking a tangent, I rediscovered Bollywood. See, I sort of grew up on Bollywood, Hindi cinema from Bombay when I was a child. Then I went to film school and I became artsy and became very Europeanized and started loving the art cinema of Europe. And it took me a long time to come back to popular cinema in Hindi. Yeah, and then I rediscovered what I did enjoy earlier. Yeah, I have lost the thread of why I was saying this.
No, it was that morality itself is.
Yeah, so the thing is, Helen was really a no-no long back. Now Kareena Kapoor does that. Now, what's her name? What's her name? She really dances very well. What's her name?
Nora Fateh.
Nahi, Baba. Katrina Kaif. I challenge any one of you to dance like her. You will break your bones. Yeah, so Katrina Kaif is completely legit today. And a family can watch Katrina Kaif together today. But Helen, bachcho ko, I mean, you would cover their eyes when Helen danced to, what was that Helen song? Monica, oh my darling. Have you seen that song?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And that's R.D. Burman singing. And R.D. Burman singing in a particular way. And Asha Bhosle, yeah.
Right. So my question was: do you think there is a certain morality we have in the theatre itself, and then outside of it?
Morality is society's way of telling you this is okay, this is not okay. Right. And what the society tells you is contextual and changeable. For example, in this campus, while you are here, you can dress in a certain way and it's completely okay, nobody will look at you. Just across the hill, I live there, no? In Baudan. If you dress up like that, people will look at you and cast censorious glances. Which is correct? It's all contextual, my dear. It's all contextual. Villainy and heroism is contextual because these are convenient tools for society to control yourself, for the dominant sections of society to control yourself. In the absolute, morality is relative. Your morality is different from mine, and legitimately so. But we accept a societal morality because we have to coexist and live. Otherwise, morality is a completely relative idea. There is nothing moral or immoral about anything.
So, sir, going further from villainy being contextual, as you just explained, in an interview you spoke about how certain figures like Harshad Mehta were considered villains, but now are glorified. Why are yesterday's villains the heroes of today?
Actually, honestly speaking, Harshad Mehta wasn't even a villain then. Harshad Mehta is actually admired by a lot of people who do stocks and things like that. Especially, for example, in Gujarat, he is not such a controversial figure. In fact, the why I mention Harshad Mehta somewhere else is if you do wrong, that's not the problem. If you play the market, that's not the problem. Don't get caught. Getting caught is the problem. Don't get caught. Yeah? So that's the whole contextual morality, and that's the context of Harshad Mehta. Harshad Mehta got caught. I can't mention certain people who did not get caught and now are very rich. But the whole thing is that you should not get caught. Society does not like someone to be caught. You can safely do stuff and be respectable, but you shouldn't get caught. That's the whole idea.
But cinematically, do you think at some point these figures were, say, not seen as good, or they were seen as villains, but now are sort of institutionalized?
Many of you, of course, might know contemporary Indian history. And till the 80s, till the early 80s, we were officially socialist.
Right.
Yeah, and our economy was supposed to be a quasi-socialist economy, where the state had a responsibility for roti, kapda or makan, education, shelter and clothing.
Right.
Yeah, and higher education also, incidentally. From the 80s onwards, from the time when Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister and Manmohan Singh was the our Finance Minister, and before that he was the RBI Governor, we accepted capitalism as a model. The day we accepted capitalism as a model, many of our villains became heroes. It was no longer wrong to accumulate money. Money making became legit. Before the 80s, the typical villain was the moneylender, the rich industrialist, and so on and so forth, the people who had lots of money. Yeah? But after the 80s, and especially since the 90s, money making is legit, and rich people are respectable people. And therefore, you have this whole phallic symbol in the middle of Bombay called Antila,
Yes.
which is owned by one of the Ambanis.
Ambani's resident.
Yeah, and that's really like, and I'm not joking, it's a phallic symbol. It's a symbol of power, right in the middle of Pedder Road, Kemp's Corner, and it's no problem at all. So what our society admires has changed, and therefore our heroes and villains have changed. So therefore you have films made on Ambani. What was the film made on Ambani where Guru, and his story has been fictionalized, and I am not going to get into it, but his story is sexed up and it's a success story of sorts. Earlier, the same industrialists would have been treated differently, and till the 70s, for example, a lot of the themes of Indian Hindi cinema, at least because I know Hindi cinema much better than any other language cinema, was about the migrant coming from the village to the big bad city and trying to survive. Yeah. So the migrant was in focus, and his or her struggle was in focus, and garibi, poverty, was romanticized. You can't find a film which romanticizes poverty anymore. It's ugly. Poverty is bad. Yeah. So, and also the 80s saw earlier, for example, the title of this film book is Purab Aur Paschim, which is a film by Manoj Kumar. He incidentally made lots of money, but he made money on patriotism. He sold patriotism and made lots of money. And Ajay has also written an article on Purab Aur Paschim in a different way, not in the manner I have written. But Purab Aur Paschim was a typical film which was made in the 70s, which showed the Paschim as the big bad place and Purab as this ideal place, which is a whole lot of bullshit, really. Yeah, it was bullshit then, it is bullshit now. So, but that bullshit was acceptable. That was hypocrisy. Everybody was accepting that hypocrisy because we were officially not worshipping the West and money. Today we are officially worshipping the West and money. The truth is somewhere in between.
Right, sir. So that's a very interesting observation because I was listening to the screenwriters conference, and in that we had Abbas Tayarwala talking. He's the director of Jaane Tu Ya Jaane Na. And he was talking about how there has been a sort of gradual change in villain. So it also sort of mirrored the progress of India. So initially it was like the Zamindar was the villain. Then there was, say, the politician, Safed Kapde mein. And then uske baad smuggler ho gaya. So as India also progressed, the villains also changed. And it seems the common theme happened to be greed here. And how now we sort of glorify the same people probably.
At one point the villain was the modern woman, the educated bahu who destroys the joint family.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Roles that I think Hema Malini or...
the most famous film which I am right, the second book is on that, is Do Raste, where Bindu is this educated woman who comes to this educated bahu who comes to the family and destroys the joint family, where Mumtaz is there and Jitendra is there and that beautiful song is there, Bindiya Chamkegi. Rajesh Khanna, sorry, not Jitendra, Rajesh Khanna. Villains बहुत rarely. I think the Ghana was only afforded to the hero or the heroine. The villains rarely did that. The Vamps did that, but their job was to show skin and be sexy and in the end they will become Sati Sadhvis. They will get reformed and not show the leg ever. And it's very interesting as to how afraid we were. I mean, this of course is the hypocrisy of Indian society. I am just saying how hypocritical we are. That skin was considered a no-no on screen. But how do you think people were reproducing? I mean, honestly speaking, this is a terrible dishonesty in our society. Even now. Just in this city you can find this dishonesty. Or in any city for that example. Yeah. Like we are really hypocritical in that sense, and our cinema much more earlier than now reflected that hypocrisy, especially in sexual manners. We were really uptight about sexuality, and we were really and much of, for example, one kind of villainy which Hindi cinema portrayed and which is talked about in my book is also about alternative sexuality. Any form of sexuality which was not man-woman was frowned upon and was considered immoral. And this whole, what you asked me earlier, this whole idea of morality is contextual, and society defines what is moral and what is not immoral. yeah, and so on and so forth.
So picking up from where you left off just now, in your book you delved into the portrayal of the eunuch antagonist Maharani from the movie Sadak. You spoke about how the middle sex have often appeared in Hindi films like Amar
Akbar Anthony.
As comic relief, and their otherness making them fair game for bigoted curiosity and contemptuous ridicule. Do you think the villains of now are sketched with a similar sense of dissonance from societal and biological normalities?
I think we are becoming, as a society, more acceptable in public about differences in sexuality, but our cinema still is not reflecting that. On the other hand, honestly speaking, it's not that in ancient Indian society, alternative sexuality was not accepted or known. Actually, it was very accepted and known. Somehow, what the journey which we have done is with being liberated to becoming, what is the opposite of liberated? Becoming this uptight, and then now trying to become what we were earlier. Otherwise, how would we produce Khajuraho? Otherwise, how would we produce any? I mean, if you go to some of those in our Indian art, for example, and Indian sculpture and temple architecture and all that, if you see some of the stuff, it's right there. And there is no inhibition about it. But somehow the journey has been regressive from earliest times to regression to now hopefully somewhere else. But we are still very self-conscious about same-sex relationships or alternative ideas of sexuality. Generally speaking, we are very regressive about sexuality per se, even though, as I said, in the private, we are obsessed with it.
Right, so, but do you think something like films like, say, Aligarh or films by Onir, they tend to sort of work towards that, work towards making it slightly...
Yeah, because Onir is, I haven't seen many films of his, but Onir is himself of a different sexuality. Yes. Therefore, his films reflect that. But in terms of popular Hindi cinema, I mean, of course, alternative films are getting made and they are being seen also. But in terms of popular Hindi cinema, different ideas of sexuality are still something to laugh at. You know, in Sadak, if you have seen Sadak, Maharani was clearly worth targeting because she didn't know her place in the scheme of things where her sexuality should be. And her chief crime was that she was a man pretending to be a woman. And that a lot of us, even now in life, find very difficult to deal with. A person who dresses up as a woman but who looks like a man. You know, we are very, very self-conscious. It has taken me a long time to accept and understand alternative ideas of sexuality. Yeah, because we are not brought up like that. And again, there is an element of hypocrisy. If you look at, for example, I am a Hindu, I am a believer. And if you look at Hinduism and how Hindu gods and goddesses are depicted, and if you look at their tales, a lot of their life is great fun. And we can worship that fun which they had in their presumed lives. But we can't do that in our own life. For example, Lord Krishna and his Leelas, we celebrate Lord Krishna and his Leelas and the gopis and all that. But we can't do that in this life. That will be considered wrong and immoral. So this is where the problem lies. That it's not that in our ancient texts and belief systems an alternative idea of society wasn't present or accepted. But it is just that we can worship something, but we cannot allow that to be practiced in our own life. Like, for example, the mother goddess, Ma, and I grew up in Bengal, so Durga Ma and Kali Ma, these are all mother figures. And Kali is a naked goddess. Kali is a naked goddess. But have you ever, do you think this society accepts a naked human being? While Ma Kali is a naked goddess. She has a garland of skulls, for God's sake, and she is worshipped in the open. And this I must say, because I discovered it much later in my life, Shiva Linga is nothing but a sexual organ, male sexual organ. I didn't know this for the longest of time. And I live in Calcutta, near my home is Dakshineshwar, which has these 21 Shiva Lingas. And all of us go and worship the lingas and put milk on it. I never realized what it literally meant till I went to Bhutan. And Bhutan, phallus worship is big time, and their phalluses are not ornate, sort of designed Shiva Lingas. They are like how human organs are, hairy and all that. And that's when you find it shocking and all that. But in Tibetan Buddhism, and especially in Bhutanese Tibetan Buddhism, it's no big deal. It's, I think, one particular Buddhist ancient figure, his phallus is worshipped in a literally depicted sense. And then so I don't know whether I'm making sense. I'm going around in circles, but yeah.
So coming back to the book, though.
Yeah.
So the book is about 4 movies essentially. One of the movies is Aankhein. Why do you think Aankhein was such an influential film with regards to its villain particularly?
Aankhein was made in 68, if I am not wrong. 1968, 62 we had a war with China, a small war with China, which we lost badly. 65 was a war with Pakistan, which was kind of a draw. And by 68, there was a lot of discontent in this country politically. And in 67 general elections, a lot of opposition parties were elected in many of the other states. Congress had been the most important party till then, and Jawaharlal Nehruji was the Prime Minister. But there was a lot of disappointment with Nehruji after the debacle, Chinese war debacle. So, in that context, for us, the villain number 1 were the Chinese and the Pakistanis. I mean, they continue to be villains for us. But there was a context to why we considered them villains. So therefore, Aankhein indirectly suggested them as the villains. And the Aankhein villain is this strange combination of Chinese and Pakistani and God knows what else, and ideas from Bond films of the villain. Some La La Land villain, which is what. And Aankhein therefore was clearly showing to the Indian public, indicating our neighbors as the villain. You must realize, even today, India thinks all its neighbors are its enemies, which is actually not a good position to be in if you think your neighbors are your enemies. Because one thing you can't change in your own personal lives are your neighbors. And we consider every single neighbor of ours, except possibly Bhutan, as someone who doesn't look kind. And it's sort of, because of the Chinese, the defeat by the Chinese in 62, the national psyche was very hurt, and it was easy to depict the Chinese as the villain, just as it is easy to depict the Chinese as a villain today also. The truth is, of course, somewhere in between. My truth is nobody is a villain. It's all contextual. I have been to China many times, and the Chinese men and women and children are as bad and as good as you are. No better, no worse. They love their children as much as you do. They love and hate in the manner you do. Yeah, they are also struggling for life as you do. There is no difference. It's just that geopolitically, there are geopolitical forces at work which makes China and India at loggerheads, and they would be at loggerheads for years to come.
Right.
But this is not the truth.
Taking from there, do you think there has been more nuance added? You know, like a film like Razi, basically. I'm referencing here. Do you think there has been nuance, because this was a slightly crude representation of who our neighbors are, versus a Razi which sort of humanizes them?
Raji I haven't seen, but
Okay.
I have heard about somebody, some student of mine talking about Razi, and yeah, I think a nuanced perspective is so much better.
Right.
But in Hindi popular cinema, the nuances have been lacking. I also talk about Mission Kashmir in this book, and Mission Kashmir, and of course Ajay is from Kashmir, so he understands Kashmir much better than me, of course, because I am an outsider. But Kashmir narrative, because of I was just telling Ajay also that the geopolitical situation of Kashmir, where it is at the crossroads of Central Asia and South Asia, it's difficult for it to have peace, because there are a lot of forces at work who want to control that piece of land. And Mission Kashmir is from the perspective of India. That film is from the perspective of India. That the militants who are working in Kashmir are Pakistani agents, and the Kashmiris who are working for us are patriots. This is a simple black and white tale. The truth is always grey, you know. And somebody's patriot is somebody's terrorist. Now that's really a difficult thing to digest for a nationalist, but that's the truth. Somebody's patriot is somebody's terrorist. Israel treats the Palestinians as terrorists, and Palestinians say Israel is occupying their land. So truth is in between.
Two sides to a story.
Absolutely. No, and honestly speaking, we are better human beings, better administrators, better money makers, better artists, if we understand that truth is a nuanced one. If ever somebody tells you that the truth is black and white, please distrust him or her. The truth is never black and white. The truth is always in grays. Human life and human existence is complex. And all said and done, human beings and nations are selfish beings. They do things in their own self-interest.
So, sir, we heard in an interview that you said Vishal Bhardwaj has a unique way of presenting villains. What does Vishal Bhardwaj do?
Vishal Bhardwaj is, for me, and actually even Ram Gopal Verma, for example, in Hindi cinema, is interesting because his leading characters are no longer heroes and heroines. They are people who are fallible, who do bad and also are good.
They're grey.
Yeah, like for example in Maqbool, or on a film called Omkara
Heather.
and Heather. These are the three films of Vishal Bhardwaj which I like very much. And also if you look at Ram Gopal Verma and look at Satya, for example, or Company, these are films which talk about, like in Satya, actually Satya is not really about Satya but Bhiku Matre. And Bhiku Matre is a bloody gangster, he kills. But he also has a heart, and he also loves his wife, and he also protects Satya. And he dies in the end, and you feel sorry for him. But he is a bloody gangster, he kills. Yeah? And in Maqbool, the Pankaj Kapoor character is a gangster. I'd forget his name, but he's a gangster, no? And in Omkara, Langla Tyagi, the Saif Ali Khan character is a bloody gangster. He kills. Yeah.
Right, sir. So, taking from there and from the films you've discussed in the book, do you think, as I said, has there been nuance added, and how are villains being portrayed right now, today, with the advent of OTT also?
I think with the advent of OTT, things have become a little more, grey has become a little more acceptable. Also because there are two things which have happened. One is, I think, positive, that the society has opened up. The second is that we have also become cynical, because we live in a society which is aspirational and capitalist. Make money any which way is legit. So you know that if you make money any which way, you are going to hurt people. And hurting people is legit also. So we have become more cynical and we have become more progressive. It's kind of contradictory. So cynicism is now acceptable as a political belief, and of course we have become much more open about sexuality, about many other things. Yeah, and ambition is no longer a bad word. When I was a child, we were taught not to be so ambitious. Ambition or greed was politically incorrect. Poverty was politically correct. Now poverty is completely incorrect, and greed is desirable. Ambition is, as young people, when you study, all you are taught is about ambition. And the central paradox of today's life is that our idea is that we are progressing. No, we are going somewhere, which actually is a bloody false idea. You're not going anywhere. The idea should have been this, that we are where we are, but we are growing. Like a tree. A tree stays where it is, but it grows. That is, you become deeper as a person. Because this vertical idea is the metaphor of the times. So anyway, coming back to, so it's acceptable to be cynical, and it's acceptable, and we are progressive at the same time. So therefore, of course, in the mainstream Hindi cinema is reflecting that, and OTT definitely is taking risks with storytelling, and especially with respect to, like, Hindi cinema was always 2 steps removed from reality. Now OTT is able to reflect what kinds of lives people are leading outside. And since there is nothing moral or immoral about say greed or ambition, therefore they are being portrayed as it is. And therefore the characters probably are more interesting, because they are not behaving like heroes and heroines. Honestly speaking, cowardice and heroism is relative. Same person can be a coward and in a context heroic. Heroism is not in your hand, neither is cowardice. It's contextual.
So, don't you think this progression from villains being purely evil and larger than life to being relatable and vulnerable at the same time, being grey, is because of the influence of Western cinema? Because after all, these OTT platforms do come.
I would like to believe the Western cinema has got it from us. Why would I expect us to be influenced by the Western cinema? I think Hindi cinema and Indian cinema has grown independent of Western cinema. If you look at Hindi cinema, song and dance is such an integral part of Hindi cinema even now. And the West can never do song and dance, even if they try. The Western, the musical is not a song and dance film. It's a different genre altogether. I am of the belief that we have influenced the West, and I don't think we have been influenced by the West, at least in mainstream Hindi cinema. Our history is much richer in narrative storytelling than the West can ever imagine. I don't think we have been influenced by the West at all. At a surface level, yes, but deep down, storytelling is within our blood, and song and dance, and if you go back to your own backgrounds and if you, scratch the surface a little of your own cultures, you will realize it's all there, man. What you must be very happy about, and what I am very happy about, is that we live in an ancient land. It seems so. I am speaking in a colonial language, you are listening to me and learning in a colonial language, but we are an ancient land. And not in the sense which politicians talk about Pushpak Vimana and all of that, not in that idiotic manner, but in a true sense we are an ancient land, and there is so much we have and so much we take for granted which has come to us from our own ancient history and heritage. So I don't think we need the West, and I don't think we are influenced by the West. I think the West has stolen from us, not us. We have stolen at a very surface level.
So talking about the West itself, your book also touches upon how the British have been represented in Hindi cinema, from Kranti to say Lagan. And so why do you think they're sort of seen as the most notorious villains of early?
Because we had our revenge, don't you see? Don't you see that that tiny island ruled us, and we were so insulted by that because a tiny island could rule us, and therefore Hindi cinema used to enjoy portraying them as stupid. The British were not stupid at all. Yeah, if just few people rule this entire continent, subcontinent, you think they were stupid? No, they were bloody intelligent. But we like to portray them as stupid and cruel. And in Kranti, for example, Tom Alter playing this British villain, and he is the only Anglo-Saxon actor in that. Otherwise, there are these Indian actors pretending to be Brit saying "Tumko kha mangta, tumko kha ta ta." That's stupid, but we enjoy doing that to the British because it's our revenge. But Tom Alter is he's an Indian, but he is an Anglo-Saxon, racially. And he is fooled twice by our singing. Twice in the film in Kranti, Tom Alter is fooled into letting the Indian revolutionaries free due to a song and dance performance. So, of course, the British were not that stupid. And the stupidest part of Kranti, and you must see Kranti just for the kind of cliches it has used about the British. Tom Alter is going to rape Hema Malini. But before he does that, he changes his clothes because he says the British don't do anything unofficial in official clothes. I mean, come on. And Manoj Kumar has written these dialogues. So you can imagine what fun we were having in showing them as stupid. The British were not stupid at all, and neither were they so cruel. Yeah, that sheer cruelty and sheer stupidity of the British is a myth. But it helps us because we take revenge on them. Just as, I'm speaking to them, to you in their language, but I have my own accent and you have your own accent. And I had a Bengali colleague who used to speak English, or he spoke every single language in Bengali only. So he will say, "You see this knobo? You see this knob?" So he will say, "You see this knobo?" So we have really screwed their language royally in India. So so this is our revenge on them. So yes, the portrayal of the British in especially early popular Hindi cinema was really like fictional, like the portrayal of the Pakistani terrorist in today's Hindi cinema is fictional. It sort of panders to what our notions of terrorism and other religion and other countries are. Is a load of bullshit.
All right, so on that note, we'd really like to thank you for this talk.
But after this last question, sir.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of villainy?
Yeah.
The future of villainy is already here, no? That what do you think? My personal opinion, I am an old-fashioned person. Capitalism is here, man. Money is okay. This is villainy. where it is okay to make money at somebody else's expense. So already villainy is here, in the sense that it's no longer a bad thing to behave badly in pursuit of your goals, whether they are of kind or of what is the other word of kind, whatever that is. Yeah. So if I want to get the guy and the girl, then any means is okay. If I want to get my villa, any means is okay. If I want to take vacation in Thailand, any means is okay, etc., etc. Any means is okay. So villainy is already here. So we long live the villain. Finally, he or she has arrived, and yeah, we are all enjoying villainous times. I think, and I hope that we come back to those slightly innocent times where a villain was a villain and a hero was a hero, and you could clearly identify, and you could have fun with what the villain did, and in the last reel say, chi, 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 chi. Now, who do you say chi, 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 chi today? You can't say that to yourself, no? I wish we come back to times where we could clearly identify, ye ganda hai, ye acha hai, aur hum doodh ke dhule hain. Like Lady Macbeth, we have our hands are full of blood, man, and they don't wash.
That's a lovely line to end this talk on. Thank you so much, sir. We're enthralled to have you. Thank you all for attending. This is the end. Thank you. We'd also like to plug his book. His book can be purchased from the National Institute of Design, NID's press. You can email them for that. And
Publications at nid.edu.
That's the email.
And it only costs 300.
So also has a few books of himself. So you can maybe check them out from him itself, or like take them. Yeah. Thank you.